welcome everyone to another episode of the Polynesian Eyes podcast. You got Tua and Masi here. We're excited for our guest. Toks Fale also goes by Rogue General. But go ahead, introduce yourself real quick, Toko, and give a quick summary of when, where, and how. And then we'll kind of get into the program.
Hello, everybody. This is Toks Fale, professional wrestler, live in Japan and New Zealand, and I'm the cousin of Tua and Masi.
Sweet. We're pretty excited. We've been working on this interview for a few weeks now. Toko's schedule is pretty busy, and so we appreciate your time, Toko, to take a couple minutes to walk through. What we're going to do before we kind of go into general discussions, I want to have a video here. We like to just have a kind of like a reaction as an icebreaker. So this video, which I think the theme that we'll take from this video is Polynesian talent and opportunity that it's out there for Polynesians in general and the impact we have. I know this is focused on sports and athletics, which is very applicable. That's the low-hanging fruit for a lot of our people. But this is also applicable across the board, whether it's business, whether it's academics, whether it's politics. I think our people bring a lot to the table. We're very young in entering into the Western civilization's kind of everyday sectors of opportunity. But we'll do a reaction. We'll watch this video, and then we'll kind of have a reaction and talk through it, and then we'll break into kind of general discussion from there.
Here, roughly 1 million high schoolers play American football. 19,369 go on to play with Division I scholarships, and 259 will get drafted to the NFL. But one elite group of players outperforms this sobering process of elimination: Samoans. So how have Samoans risen to NFL greatness? This is clarified.
And I would just kind of clarify for clarified, Polynesians in general, right? Because I mean, Samoans, when you calculate the Samoans, I think for African Americans, they're 40 times more likely to make the NFL than a Caucasian, and then Polynesians are 40 times more likely than the African American to make the NFL. And obviously, you look at certain populations, the Tongan population is much smaller, and so and so that influence is multiplied. But I know it says Samoans, but in general, this applies to Polynesians across the board.
No, but I was gonna add on to like, and the reason why Samoans also has a leg up too, because American Samoa is also a big access to play
to the
American
US
football. Yes, because Tonga is literally you're starting when you let's just say migrate. It's a totally different sport, totally different way to adapt in life. You know, American Samoa, they use American currency. It's somewhat lower level from like Hawaii, but that's another reason why it's
easier transition.
A lot easier.
Yeah.
Citizenship.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Each season, new NFL players fight to earn their playing time. Recently, that was the case for Tua Tagovailoa and Makia Puka Nacua. During the 2023 to 2024 season, Puka broke the NFL rookie receiving record with 1,486 yards, while Tua conducted historic performances for the Dolphins offense. Puka and Tua are the latest in a growing trend of offensive standouts with ties to the Pacific. Samoans make up a disproportionately overrepresented ethnic group in the NFL. A Samoan is 56% more likely than any other ethnic group to make it to the professional level. And with a population of just 50,000 in American Samoa, they make up a remarkable 3% of the NFL. But why did Samoans take to football? Ever since American Samoa became a U.S. territory, the island has weaved foreign sports into its way of life, contributing to this overrepresentation in the NFL. The U.S. had a period of ignoring Samoa until 1960, when Reader's Digest published an article named America's Shame in the Pacific. News of terrible living conditions on the island spread and caused the Kennedy administration to attempt to revamp.
That poor little pig, he's crying not because he's hungry, he knows his future is determined already. the next Fakaafe or the next Fa'alave, is that what they call it? Masi, what's the Samoan version of that?
The next Fa'alabe.
Their way of life. This included new resources and even American television, which helped spark football fever. The physical nature of the game appealed to Samoans who embraced competition, reverence, and contact, and had already adopted rugby.
For decades now, they've been very productive football players in high school level, the college level, and of course in the pros. The Samoans in general are real physical people. They're big, they're physical. I think it happens to do a little bit with our culture. We brought up pretty tough in the Samoan culture.
I think there was a study, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there was a study that did average height and weight and size of people, and Polynesians were like off the charts. I think the average height for a Polynesian was like 6 foot, and all other places were like 5'10", 5'11" maybe, but on average, like Polynesians in regards to physical attributes, on
even
average,
bone density,
right? Like across the board. And we got to remember, I mean, when you say average, other larger populations will have taller people, right? More taller people, but in regards to the consistency of the recipe for every Polynesian, it's higher probability. So that's why on average, when you do the per capita size, Polynesians are like off the charts. And then you add in there the speed, the footwork, and a lot of those other things. And then my favorite, I think there's a unique sense of aggressive nature that Polynesians bring to the table that you don't, and it comes a little more natural. I don't know, any kind of thoughts from you guys on that or anything you've seen so far? No, we'll jump into it. Go ahead, Toko.
The aggressiveness and I think the warrior spirit.
Mhm.
Once you get that switch, you become a warrior on the field.
Yeah.
No, just to add on that switch, I think that's a unique thing of a Polynesian. We can be funny at the same time, totally different. After, like, even if I pancake you on the football field, or I even like somewhat bullied you somewhere else, but at the same time I can still have fun and we can still be friends. And I think that's such a Polynesian trait too. We can be funny, aggressive, and mean all in one at the same time.
Yes, 100%. And that's what I think a lot of other cultures, they kind of go into shock, right? Because, fun, play, everybody's having a good time, sing. But when it's a showdown time, all of a sudden, it's a whole different animal you're dealing with.
Fa Samoa, or the Samoan way, has helped Samoans apply their ancestral values to sports too. The culture gives respect to elders, or in this case, coaches, as well as focusing on the community or team over the individual. And all this is expressed through competition. Training for a high school football player in the Polynesian Islands is starkly different from the mainland US. Samoans deal with extreme poverty, obesity, and fall behind in education. Professional sports are a feasible gateway to success. One of the greatest beacons of Fa Samoa, Troy Polamalu, has described football on the island as a meal ticket. Like other marginalized ethnic groups, the risk of pursuing the dream of NFL stardom is worth it. It paid off for players like Jesse Sapalu and Domata Peko too. Remarkably, youth football only made its way to the island in 2011, meaning that every island-born player that made it to the NFL beforehand did not officially start playing until high school. Now, coaches on the island are able to develop more intricate skill positions like quarterbacks and receivers to a greater degree. Samoans are no longer just large offensive or defensive linemen. Now, Tua and Puka are changing that and approach their skill positions just as their proud predecessors have, with the Samoan way.
There's more and more Samoan NFL athletes. There's also more and more Samoans that are, judges and lawyers and doctors as well. I think that the cool thing is I think football was kind of been that preempted all of this sort of, coming to America and trying to.
Troy Polamalu is a prime example of that. Listen to that voice. Listen to
Mm.
that demeanor, and then watch him when he plays. You
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
never guess that
He
that's the
speaks like
voice and the body language of the guy on the field who was
mm,
terrorizing offensive teams, right?
yeah. Yeah.
And look
Yeah.
at him. He just seems like a humble guy. Like you could see this guy back on the islands just with a whole lafa lafa, walking to Uta every day, just working, look like an average Joe, but there is a lot of raw talent, right? Just
Mm.
in the genetic material, in the mindset through the culture. But talking about a whole different animal from having a decent conversation to, you know, a football game.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, Dua, that's pretty important because with because most Polynesians are usually, in the past, mostly recruited as O linemen and D linemen, and I think that makes sense why Polynesians would get into football playing sports much later in high school, right? But those positions with quarterback, those specialized positions, quarterback, defensive back, safety, or even like wide receivers, I think those are the specialized things that you probably have to start at a kind of a
Younger
younger,
age.
right?
Yeah.
You were talking about youth football, so I thought that was interesting
Yeah.
that
And
they
and,
said they
and
only introduced it youth football because it wasn't there prior, and now we're gonna get more Polynesians who are gonna diversify, which is evident now that with the quarterbacks, there's a lot more Polynesian quarterbacks. Tua Tagovailoa, the Samoans are doing really good at quarterback. We have a Tongan kid that's actually coming up. Looks like he's been doing
in
playing quarterback.
Arizona. Yeah.
Yes, playing quarterback before he was getting to high school because those are the mechanics that you need, the mental side that you need to understand to play specialized position. You have to start way before high school.
Yeah. And we're seeing this in rugby league and rugby union, right? You look at rugby league, look at
Mm,
the New South Wales, the
yeah,
halves, Jerome Luai,
yeah.
in the halves, and then now you have Crichton, who's in
Mm,
the centers, and then you also have Swali'i. I mean, you're having all these. This is the same thing. Now same thing with rugby union, right? Christian Liafano for the Wallabies for a while. Now we have Richie Mounga. We're having
mm,
all these players that are now, because they're growing up, getting trained at a young age. Before
yeah.
it was like, oh, Polynesians don't know how to manage a game. No, that's just a function of exposure. You expose a Polynesian mind to how to manage a game, how to make decisions. We can do that too, but we
Mm,
we haven't had the
good point.
exposure. And then the natural talent is a gift from God that many of us get. So we're seeing it not only in the NFL, but just for other viewers, is this is very evident in rugby league and rugby union as
Mm,
well. And also with where Toko is going now in the wrestling. Now we're looking at WWE, Roman Reigns. You're looking at
another
The
big.
Rock. You're
Yeah.
seeing it in all parts of culture where it's expanding to.
Mm.
Have any thoughts or anything on that, Toko, or you want to jump back into the video here?
Yeah, let's go on over.
Okay.
Figure out how to make it in this world.
In a sport where individualism can drive players to great heights, Samoans on and off the island have found success in embracing community. Their success is part of a greater shift in creating visibility and representation beyond the game.
There we go. That was it. I thought that would be a good icebreaker just to kind of, talk about some of the exciting things that's happening in the culture with our people and really see. I think we're in a cool place in history. We're seeing a pivot, we're seeing a transition where Polynesian are entering entertainment, entering music,
Mm.
entering not just in specific sports, but in different positions in sports. And it's just a really exciting time, right? I mean, this is what one would argue, this is what our ancestors came to foreign lands, was to provide a new opportunity for their families. And on average it takes 2 generations, 1 or 2 generations. So we have a lot to be grateful for, because the first wave that came in, they were just laying the foundation, right? It's you're going to come in, lay the foundation, and the dream is for the next generation.
Mm.
Any other kind of final thoughts or comments on the video, and then we'll jump into just some general discussion.
No, no, agree. Polynesians have definitely, we've definitely pushed above our weight, especially in the U.S. I think what's the count to of Polynesian in the census? It was like 0.02%,
Yeah.
not even one, and a good amount of let's just say the American population knows a Polynesian, especially with the recently with Tua Tagovailoa's huge contract. He's going to be a franchise quarterback. That Tongi kid winning American Idol.
Yeah.
That's you know
Em Tong. Yeah. See,
Ian
that's
Tongi,
another. Yeah.
Ian Tongi. Like so, Polynesians are we're definitely pushing above our weight around the world. So yeah, New Zealand, Australia, they already know what it's Polynesians about, but those places like in Eastern USA, South USA, they definitely with David with Tua talking about Law and EM, they've definitely put a mark, and everyone kind of knows a Polynesian for a 0.02%.
Exactly. Not 100%. Any additional thoughts there, Toko?
I want to talk about what you brought up about exposure.
Mm-hmm.
Why our people can't, or our fault could not be in positions like quarterbacking and all that. I compare it back to my rugby days when, because I went to a school with, I'd say 90% Islanders and the rest are Asians and Palang. And I had a game against another school just down the road, and when we played them, they were 90% white and 10% Polynesians and Asians. And playing against them, there were two Tongans in that team. And I'm pretty sure you guys know that his name is Nili Latu. Nili Latu is one of
He
the
was the
coaches
captain for the
Tonga.
Ikaretahi.
Yeah, so he played from the other team, and I swear I had never seen a Tongan as fit as Nili growing up. Playing other Polynesian teams, other schools. We were seen as the players who only last for 10 minutes. But when I played against Billy, I thought he was fitter than all the white boys. But it's so true what you were talking about. I believe he grew up at a school where they're exposed to, the right type of food, the right type of trainings. Where
Nutrition.
in where we grow up and go to school, they just say, "Oh, get the ball, get the try near the try line," and they don't really care if you can do anything else as long as you use your power. And I think you hit the bullseye there by when you talked about the exposure and some of these new generation being exposed to how they actually need to play.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think our people are starting to realize is it's not a complex formula, right? Once you see the formula, it's like, oh, I can do that. You know what I mean? And as once you have one person do it, then they show another person, then all of a sudden the standards get increased, the efficiency rate, and all of a sudden that's why I think we're kind of at a turning point. We're not just seeing Polynesians, just entering and surviving, like you're saying, right, with the bare minimum, where they're just relying on the raw talent. Now they're seeing their talent get refined, and they're being taught and exposed to ways to maximize their talent. That's why we're seeing these guys perform off the charts, right? I mean, we look at someone. Let's take for an example here, Jonah Lomu. Jonah Lomu was just so statistically off the charts that nobody could touch him, right? And it was quite clear, I think, in our last discussion, Masi, that there's and I never thought of it, but I think there's a real possibility that the mentality of you can't have the player bigger than the team limited a lot of things that I think Jonah could have done. Because I think, everybody was like, and we were discussing this, Toko, on another podcast. There still seems to be kind of a culture we see in a little bit in Australia, but especially in New Zealand, the player cannot be bigger than the team. But in America, everything is shifting. right? Where everything is about, dude, the player. Like, just look at LeBron James. LeBron James, when LeBron goes from one team to another team, millions of people go with the player to the next team that he goes to. Um, and we're now seeing where, like Brian To'o, he's now saying, hey, I think I'm being underpaid, right? He's now, and he's still under contract. And to me, I'm like, our people are starting to understand.
Yeah.
I have
Catch up
this
the game.
talent. There's a window that I have to maximize because sports is a young man's game. And our people are starting to understand, like, oh, Yahweh, I got maybe 10, 15 years. I gotta maximize this time and extract, where our old school mentality is, just be grateful you have a position on the team, which is true. But at the same time, when you see the big picture and people are telling you, no, Brian, you only got, maybe 3 years where you can get max deals, you got to push it and you got to make the team pay you what you're worth. And that kind of mentality is shifting. I don't know, that's just kind of like the observation I'm seeing on not only on the talent development, but on the business acumen. Our people are starting to be like, oh, no. I know I'm Polynesian. I'm trying to be respectful, but I'm the best wing in the NRL, and that guy on the junk team is getting paid $300K more than me. Why am I not getting that money? Right? And putting pressure on the team to step up.
Yeah. No, and that's a good discussion of how Polynesians have to navigate the new way, because the thing is, in order to be, and this is what most Polynesians need to are probably dealing with, is when you have to, when to be a Polynesian, when you got, this is just straight business. I got to think of me, because if you don't have that thinking, you're gonna, let's just say, you're gonna be the same mentality of when you're your first, whoever's the first family that made that move. You're just gonna say, I'm just grateful for the piece of bread. I'm grateful for the thing. You need, the reason why your family sacrificed to go through the hard times is for you to be one step smarter, more. You should be assimilated to your surroundings. And I think another thing that also helps, like especially when they're third generation in living in overseas from your native country, that your supporters know where to take you. Like, if this school is not helping you getting that exposure for your talent, there's a lot of Polynesian. I know in the U.S., a lot of Polynesian families are saying, we're going to move you to another school, or we're going to move you to another school that's going to emphasize your talent and get you that exposure so you can get a scholarship to go to university. You can get a contract to go to maybe professional when you're done with that. So that's part of the evolution. But yeah, that's a good example with Brian Toll, because I know that's been in the media, and I know a lot of the analysts. It's a new thing talking about a Polynesian player saying, "Hey, I'm not happy with my contract," and
Yeah.
that's not a Polynesian thing to say, because they've always used to, what they used to a Polynesian say, you give them a contract, they're usually good with that.
They'll
But
just be quiet. Yeah.
yes, but this is the new, and this is just part of evolution of when to navigate the different worlds that most Polynesians go to, because they are, a lot of their stories of Polynesian ways are passed down, and it's good. But at the same time, to be good is fine, but if you want to be great and get to higher success for the next generation, you've got to understand of how these guys do in the Western world. So I'm glad Brian To'o is making that,
Putting the
because
pressure.
his next contract is probably going to be $1 million or more, because he's
Yeah.
only 600,000, and that's not much for the best winger in the NRL.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hey, Togo. So let's come back, and I was going to bring up another video of a NRL guy who was kind of talk about the same thing, but I think we'll come back, kind of share your story. Obviously we started off in Tonga, right? Kind of start there, your journey to New Zealand. What were kind of like your aspirations, your experience, and lessons learned? You went to a college that um, allowed you to play rugby. Where did that take you? And just kind of give some navigation, and then we'll just kind of maybe discuss some points along the line. But so people understand where did this person who now is very successful in sports internationally, right? Usually in a sport that's not your traditional route. how did that happen? And just kind of like, kind of give people that background.
Okay. Yeah. So I grew up in Tonga for the first 6 years of my life, and that's when I met you guys and spent some time with you guys. I'll never forget those days. And that's you guys. I'm sure Dua will remember. We watched a lot of wrestling back then because our grandfather was a big wrestling fan, and his sons would, if they were in America, your dad would send back
The
videos of
tapes.
wrestling, and
Yeah.
we would watch, the tapes. We would wait months to get the new one, and the ones that we had, we've watched it
A
thousands,
million times.
not thousands of times, and that's when I got the interest, or that piqued my interest in wrestling. It was very, very different, going from having nothing to having pretty much everything that you've always dreamt of. Um,
Mm.
but one story that really affected my life was, I think I was 8 years old, 2 years into primary over here, primary school, elementary school in New Zealand. Um, we were in the car, and I had one of my uncles, and I was there with my brother Tati and Dai, and he asked all of us, what do we want to become when we grow up? And my brothers would reply, they wanted to be rugby players. And me thinking, yeah, I'll tell him what my dream is. And he asked me what I wanted to be, and I said I wanted to be a wrestler. And I will never forget when he turned around and he looked at me and he said, "Don't be stupid. You can't make a living out of that."
Mm.
And that crushed my dream. So
Mm.
yeah,
Mm.
so once when he said that, I kind of suppressed it and went after the second best thing, and that was rugby. And I wanted to become a professional rugby player, and went after that, and was lucky enough to secure a scholarship to Japan when I was in my last year of high school, and ended up at a university rugby scholarship into school in Japan, and did 4 years at uni while I was playing rugby.
Give us some insight. How did the opportunity to Japan materialize? Was that on your radar, or did it fell in your lap? And how common was that? Because now it's a little bit more common, but I don't know how common that was during your time, and what years were those, just to kind of give us some context as to, some texture as to how this opportunity came your way.
Before I went to Japan, there were just a handful of rugby players who made it to Japan. Maybe I'd say 10 to 15 guys were in Japan at the time, and this was the late 90s.
Mm.
And we'd hear about those guys who ex All Blacks, some of the older blues players and all that. But a scholarship was available, and it was advertised that they were looking for someone to for free guys to take to Japan. And I was lucky enough; they came and watched my last game of the season for De La Salle College, and the recruiter was there. So he came along and had a chat with our coach, and we sat down and we talked, and that's how I got my scholarship to go to Japan. At that time, there was not many scholarships going to islands and coming to New Zealand, but there were a few boys from Tonga, from Toloa and Atele. They were already there, but
Mm.
when I went there was only a handful of us.
Yeah.
I think in the late 2000s is when the high schools and the straight out of college um, scholarships were plentiful. So
And that's what I
right
wanted to
now
kind
they're
of.
taking kids straight to elementary and then
Mm.
go from there. Whereas when I went, it was either straight to a professional team or go straight to university, and
No, and
that's how that
that's
came
what I
about.
wanted to kind of dial into, Toko, was number one, you're at the front end, right? This is not a typical path for going to rugby, and I think for two reasons. You can correct me, because you already have super rugby, right? The high school kids, everyone is already kind of looking, oh, the normal path is you join maybe a local club, and then you try to get on to a super rugby team. And people are maybe not as excited as an opportunity to Japan, because number one, how does that get me to be an all black, right? When the pinnacle is to be an all black, that's where everybody's going. And then number two, going to a whole different country where I don't even speak the language, and do, like, a lot of people are scared of that, right? Like it takes certain reasons to do that, and I want to understand, what were your reasons, what drove you, right? To say, hey, you know what, everybody is going on the left lane, I'm gonna go on the right lane. Like, I'm starting to see early in your career, we'll say, that you're already kind of going against where the typical flow of the people are, and I'm trying to understand, like, how and why. So it looks like, there's some luck. You right? There's some luck and opportunity. You have a recruiter there watching you. It sounds like you had a great game. Luckily, they didn't come on a game where you got injured or you had a bad game. So, there's a little bit of luck in there, but you have to make your luck and opportunities work for you. So you were obviously you were doing enough work to be fit to participate in the team, to have that opportunity, but you still have to make that decision, right? I know a lot of people, a huge opportunity comes their way, and they have two problems. They don't recognize it's an opportunity. They may put it down. I'm going to go play for the Blues. Why am I going to Japan? Or the other one is they recognize it's an opportunity, but they're too afraid to try something new. Help us understand why you chose that path.
The fear, of course, is one of the biggest things, because I know a lot of guys who were offered to go to Japan or go to Argentina or France and didn't take it because I have to stay and look after mom and dad. No, the main factor for me was I was offered a spot to play in one of the Auckland developmental programs, but at the same time I was planning on going to Auckland University, and I didn't have any money, so I wanted to go to university, but I couldn't afford to go. So when
Pay
this
the
scholarship
tuition.
came up, all I could see was free school, a free degree. So I didn't think about the rugby. I thought about, okay, I can go and get my degree and still play rugby on the side. So that was the main factor for me, because at the same time, making it, especially in Auckland, it's very tough. You have all the
Mm-hmm.
talent in the world in Auckland, and they all trying to get into this one team. So I kind of thought, I'd rather just go straight to Japan and do the scholarship, and then see how rugby goes. While some of my friends were just dreaming about making the All Blacks or playing for Auckland. But I kind of took the realistic route, and I thought, I could try and end up like everybody else, who eventually leave Auckland and end up in different parts of New Zealand and have a better career than a lot of guys who stay in Auckland and just lost in the system. So that was the big factor. It was free schooling, and I was still playing rugby at the same time as a pro.
No, that's
But it
that's a
was scary. It
great
was very
great thing.
scary.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
tell you, when I went to tell my dad that I was going to Japan, it was very scary because I was scared he was going to say no. He was going to say no, stay here. Yeah, yeah. But I was surprised when he said, "If that's what you want to do, then do it." And then, when I told my mom said, "No, you're not going. You stay here." And then so my dad said, "Nah, let him go."
Yeah, he's a
It was
grown
completely the
man.
opposite. Yeah, all I knew about Japan was konnichiwa, sushi, and what I've seen on the movies. Right? So right up until I got off the plane, I still had in my mind that people were walking around with straw hats, and samurai swords.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
Mm, mm. I was just gonna say that
Okay.
going with life, it's good to have many options, and that's why we talk about rugby league, professional wrestling, NFL, union. It's good to have many options because, like that, some people think like the uncle, our uncle saying that that couldn't make a living. It's just because the exposure. He wasn't exposure that you can make a living off of wrestling. It was only rugby. But I'm glad that you had many options and you fell on your second option being a rugby player that got you to where you at, and then eventually kind of got you back to your first one. And I think that's an important aspect, especially with the Polynesian youth. Diversify your goals, diversify your pathways, because if you stuck with one, people can say stuff, you might not get there, and you probably will come through some barriers that you can't
Mm.
get there. But you could fall on, like, always try to have three. Three is a good number to always have. What you can do more is always good, but just try to have three, because if you have one, you're gonna find out that it's gonna be very, very difficult. And sometimes, I think you mentioned it, Tua, luck does play, because you need some people to maybe recognize or be there where you're doing your best, or not when you're not doing your best, and then somebody thinks you don't have that talent. But it's just very important, just for Polynesians who wanna do well in life, whether that be sports or entertainment, or through a career, professional work. Diversify,
Yeah.
diversify your goals. So I just wanted to touch on that.
Tell us what it's like. So, number one, you're entering a new country, you're away from your family. That is already mentally and emotionally challenging. How was learning a brand new language go? Because going to college with the language that you already know is can be challenging. So now you're going to college, you got to learn the new language that the college is operating in, and then learning the language also in a different culture of rugby. How did you manage that whole
Mm,
transition? Because that seems to be very challenging. Just to help, I think this is important to help younger Polynesians to understand, just because it's difficult and challenging, don't be afraid. Kind of do what you did. Look at what your long-term goal is, see what gives me the maximum amount of opportunity, and like Masi said, diversity of opportunity, so I can hopefully find success wherever it may lead me.
Yes, yes. It was a very difficult experience. You know, especially coming from a country where rugby, you think rugby's you're the best rugby team in rugby world country in the world, and you go there and you think, oh, I know everything, and to quickly realize that they have their own way of doing things, and if you don't do what they tell you to do, then you're quickly let go or told to go somewhere else. So that was difficult, but the language as well was very tough. The one thing that got me that made it a little bit easier was the tonations of the Japanese language was similar to Tongan. Was the way they talked was kind of like uh, kind of went similar to how Tongans uh, pronounce their vowels and
mm,
things like that. But that helped a little bit. But remembering things was very tough. Trying to study the characters was tough. But one thing that really helped me out was I was watching TV, and that's when I came across Konishiki, Musashi Maru, and Akebono. So these three giants were from
The
Hawaii.
sumo guys.
One's a Tongan, the sumo boys, and they were
mm,
called the Hawaiian Wave, and they were like they're considered as gods of there because once you become grand champion or champion in sumo, you're pretty much up there with the gods in Japan. So wherever you go, people kind of like
mm,
bow and treat you like a god. But watching them being at the top of their sport and being there for years, there was one thing that one of them, Musashi Maru, did an interview, and he said one thing that never left me, and I'll never forget, is he said, when foreigners come here, they come here and they think that their way is the best way. So when they go there, they try and change how the Japanese do things. But what he found worked, and what I took from him, and it definitely worked for me, is when you go anywhere else or a different country, you have to embrace yourself in the culture. You
Mhm.
have to try and understand why they do things. If they bow, why are they bowing? Is they how they say hello? Are they saying sorry? I gotta try and mimic that and do that. I can't go there and they bow and you put your hand up like this, right?
Mhm.
Mm,
It's especially in rugby. You go there and try to tell them how to play rugby, and then when you play in the game and they grass cut you, and you're like, nobody grass cuts me in New Zealand. Why are they grass cutting me? Well, they've been doing their way for a long time, and they're making good money, and they're bringing you to Japan. So I I, I learned that from Musashi Maru. When you go to a new culture, embrace it. You know,
mm,
embrace the culture
Mhm.
because you'll end up understanding it faster, and you're gonna enjoy it more. Where a lot of guys that I have met and come to Japan just couldn't handle the food, couldn't handle the language, couldn't handle a lot of things. So they end up just quitting or leaving the country.
Okay. That's a interesting. So if I understand correctly, what we're trying to understand here is the way to adapt and to survive is not to fight the inevitable, right? It's the way to adapt is to embrace the challenge, embrace the change, and as you embrace it, you find how you fit into the culture, into a way to be successful is kind of what I'm kind of understanding
mm,
from that.
mm.
Okay. And Toko, so what was your college career like in rugby? Did it lead to any professional opportunities? And then how did you get into wrestling?
Uh, so after graduating from college, I secured a contract to one of the pro teams over there, and I was there for 2.5 years. And while I
Mhm,
was playing, there was a big crash back in the late 2000s in the economy, and my
mm,
contract had come up. So re-signing or trying to get to another team was basically impossible because nobody had money. No company was hiring, so I had no other choice but try and figure out what to do next. And one option was leaving and coming back to New Zealand and trying here.
Mm,
But I had met one of the sumo wrestlers who was at a lower rank, who was just starting a couple of years earlier. I had met him during my rugby days, and we became good friends. Minami Noshima, and he was just finishing up from sumo, and he was thinking of getting into the wrestling. So he asked me when he heard that I was either leaving or trying to find something else. He called me and he asked me if he wanted to join him for the tryout for the
mm,
wrestling. And there was, the dream that I had as a kid, and I'd always had it in the back of my mind. I then thought, hey, this is the best time to try it because where else am I going to go and try out? Because New Zealand didn't have that option, and that's how I ended up going to into wrestling. I turned up to go to a tryout with my sumo wrestler friend, and did the tryout, got in, and been a wrestler for the last 14, 15 years.
wow. That's pretty amazing. And that's something that I think people underestimate and underappreciate networking and building relationship. And as Polynesians, we should understand this more than a lot of people. The
Yes.
importance of building a relationship with people all around us, because you don't know where the opportunity is going to come from. And,
Mm.
a childhood dream materializes and leads to a 14-year and continuing career because you maintained a relationship with someone, right? And I think that's something that is important for our youth to understand, that some of the things in our culture, they can be very helpful in helping us achieve our dreams. Because look at that. You took something that could have been a negative, but it ends up that negative was the necessary opportunity to get you into wrestling. Because I mean,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people miscalculate that once you get a professional contract, the risks are still high. You get injured, you have a major injury, that ruins your whole career. I mean, wrestling, you can still get injured in wrestling. But I think it's a lot safer of a career because the risk of injury is not as high, but the opportunity is still tremendous. What would you say, if you were to compare the average rugby career in rugby in Japan versus your career that you've identified? Are they equal in the opportunity and the compensation, higher, lower? I'm just trying to understand how pursuing your dream and taking advantage of a unique opportunity, did it still allow you to achieve your goals in life? I'm just trying to see which, in theory, if you went one way or the other, what the potential outcomes could have been. Does that make sense, Toko?
Yes. I I I truly think deciding to go with wrestling was the best choice. If I had a chance to carry on playing rugby, I would have taken it back then.
Yeah.
But at the time, the wrestling was the only option, and I'm definitely glad that I took that road, because I'm 42 now, and I'm still wrestling, and I can still wrestle
Mm.
until I'm in my 60s. There's some guys who are still wrestling in their 70s.
Yeah, like Ric
And
Flair and those
compared
guys,
to
they
Oh,
rugby
did it
Rick.
until
players,
they
if
were
you make
way
it over
old.
30 as a rugby player, that means
Yeah.
you've been looking after your body.
Yeah.
Hmm. My next question is, what would be, if you were able to go back to you at sitting in the back of your uncle's car and hearing your
Oh
uncle
yeah.
say, "Don't you ever give me a answer like that again to go wrestling," what would you tell yourself then? And what would you tell yourself when you were in high school, getting ready to consider the opportunity of going to Japan versus the developmental team in Auckland? And then what would you tell yourself when the market crashes and there's no opportunity to extend your contract? Just kind of tell us what you think you would tell yourself in
Sorry,
those
breaking
three
up.
stages.
I would say to my 8-year old self, I would say, don't go to high school.
Hmm.
If you want to be a wrestler, go be a wrestler now, because going to high school was, of course, I don't regret it, but if wrestling is what you want to do, there's a faster way to get there. And it took me over almost 20 years to get to wrestling. And going to college was, of course, I went to college because there was the thing. You gotta go graduate from college. Make your family proud. But what I learned from college, or the degree I got from college, hasn't helped me one bit in the career I've gone in the last 15 years. So I would say to my 8-year-old self is, when you get to 15, find a wrestling school, learn how to be a wrestler, and then go after with all your heart. And
Mm.
if I had the same, if I could say something to my high school self, I'd say the same thing. Don't worry about college. if you want to be a wrestler, go figure it out. Find a school, learn how to wrestle, and be a wrestler. Because
Yeah.
I believe, playing rugby was good for me, but I believe there was at least 10 years wasted because I could have done all the things I'm doing now 10 years earlier.
Mm.
Is that the driver and the vision for your gym and your school and bringing the opportunities back to New Zealand and in Australia? Is that what you're trying to provide to other people? Is that option, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. You didn't have someone who could say, Toko, what do you want to achieve? And then you say, I want to go wrestling, and say, okay, if you're serious about wrestling, here is the formula, right? And if you're serious, follow this formula and it'll get you there quicker. The product that you will be much, much better, right? And then you can maximize the value while you're in wrestling. Is that the vision behind why you're going back to New Zealand and Australia and establishing basically the pathway?
That's mostly that's the reason. You know, there's a saying where you know, be the person that you needed when you were at that age.
Mm,
That's something that stuck with me as well. Is when I was that young, I wish there was a school around. I wish somebody had already been through it and could tell me, okay, it's okay to do that, because you do face a lot of negativity on whatever route you take, and people will tell you can't do it. People will say it's not good. People will say you won't make any money in it. But coming back and recognizing that the talent out here is vast, and the only options we have is either rugby or some guys go into martial arts and mixed MMA, but just another option. Uh, we have a lot of big Polynesian boys here who are doing nothing, and
Mm.
especially coming out of rugby, a lot of guys get into the developmental, but never get into the top team, and mainly because I'd say some teams just want to hold on to the talent so nobody else gets them. So a lot of those guys who come out of that system have nothing else. But I try and target them because they've already been to the top level of training. They've already got the looks. They've already got the bodies. And I try and target those guys, especially here in South Auckland, because there's so many of them.
yeah.
Give
Mm.
them another chance to, still shine in the light and try and make a little bit more money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was having a discussion with a business owner, and we were discussing about certain things, and I think this may be a good way to kind of explain to younger people as they're coming up and as they make their decisions. You need to look at your person as a brand and as a business, right? You need to look at as you as an individual, as a brand and as a business, and you need to make decisions with that in mind. And I'll give like some examples. Let's say you're this really good, talented rugby player coming up through high school, and you're going to sit down in Toko's position. Are you going to go the developmental route and go to the Auckland Blues, Super Rugby, whatever it is, or there's a unique opportunity to explore new lands and new opportunities, and you need to ask yourself, what's good for the business, and what's the business? You, right? And what gives you the most amount of opportunity? And I think too many
Yes.
people just sit back and they just kind of, I'm going to go to the right or I'm going to go to the left, right? And they need to sit back, because I think that's what you're saying, right, Toko? When you look at you as a business from 8 years old to 18 years old, you're saying, I wasted a lot of time. I could have developed my asset, I could have developed my brand. I lost 10 years because I was going on a different path. And I think that's what a lot of Polynesians need to take more into account is like Brian To'o. Brian To'o is thinking like Brian To'o LLC is not getting the maximum value in my contract with the other business, which is my team. And those two businesses got to negotiate. And I think that's what you're trying to bring to the table is to help these athletes know, hey, you can be a small fish in a big pond, which is the typical route everyone's going in. Or I'm telling you, you could be a medium to a large fish in what you think is a smaller pond, but the opportunity is tremendous. And if people look at it from a business perspective on what's best for my business and my brand, they might say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go where someone's going to invest in me, who's dedicated in me, who wants my success means is their success. Because when you go the route where everyone else is going, trust me, there's politics. You could be the most talented guy. You could be the most good looking guy. But when there's 100,000 other people who have friends, families, or connections, they're going to get the opportunities and not you. And so you have to kind of take that into account. Is that what you're kind of seeing? Some of the mistakes some of our younger athletes are making is they're not thinking with that right mindset. What are your observations there, Toko?
Yes, that's a great point. That reminds me of time the late 2000s. My old high school, De La Salle College, came to Japan for the World Youth Rugby Championships, and one of the boys there really stood out, and a lot of the university coaches and some of the professional team coaches came around to take a look at this kid, and he was so good. He was playing first five. Tim Fale. So after that competition, he went back to New Zealand, and he called me like a month or two later, and he wanted to hear my advice. And he said that Auckland NPC wants him, but at the same time, there's a couple of universities in Japan that want him too. So he wasn't sure what he should do. And I pushed him. I said, if you come to Japan, you won't play for the All Blacks. If that's your goal to play for the All Blacks, then maybe stay in New Zealand. But I tell you, playing for Auckland is not a big guarantee because you'll be in the system, but there's 1,000 other people trying to get into that same spot. And I thought, he'll just stay because getting an offer to play for Auckland is a big thing. But to my surprise, the next year he turned up and went to university. And the big thing is, a couple of years later, when he graduated, he started playing professional. The Sunwolves started. The Sunwolves team that was from Japan, and he'd never ever thought he'd play Super Rugby.
Super Rugby.
And then there you go. He went and did the scholarship, which was for free. A whole different experience in a different country. Now he speaks Japanese, and then he plays Super Rugby, which was one of his big dreams. And then he gets into the Japan team and becomes one of the biggest names in Japanese rugby, and played for the World Cup in the team that beat South Africa, and that was one of the biggest
upsets of all time
in rugby history. So, but just thinking about the decision he made, like a lot of guys think, oh, I need to make the All Blacks, I need to make one of these Super Rugby teams to be able to go to Japan or go to France and make some big money. But him making that sacrifice ended up fulfilling all his dreams. What's the word? Killing two birds with one stone. Where a lot of guys go straight to Auckland and play rugby. These days, it's very hard to get to Japan. You may play for the All Blacks and still find it hard to get to Japan because there are bigger names who are getting those contracts. So getting overseas now, they don't care if you played Super Rugby or it's
Mm.
all who you know now. Where back then, man, going to Japan was the best choice I made, and I'm pretty sure Tim reckons the same thing.
No, and that's the thing that I think that your story kind of highlights is go where there's opportunity. Don't look at what looks shiny on the outside, kind of like what Mussy mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Go where there's opportunity, where there's diverse opportunity, and it's because it won't always be there, right? Like you're saying, when you were going, they were almost asking people to come, but people didn't have the courage to take that risk, to go and to do something difficult. Now that it's easier, now more people want to go, but they're like, no, 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 no. You don't get, there's always a risk and a benefit. And the more tolerance you have for risk, and if you're able to do it right, the reward is higher. And that's where I think a lot of the youth is, they think, oh, I can play it safe and get all the reward. It's like, no, man. The same thing in business is the same thing in your personal brand. It's the same thing in sports. You take risk, you tend
Mm.
to get more reward. Any thoughts, any questions, Masi?
No, I was just kind of thinking to myself with the pathway of just going to that university pathway in Japan. You have a lot more safety net, but it's a sacrifice at the same time. Safety net in the sense, let's just say you go to the university pathway, rugby doesn't work, and then you get injured, and then what's the third option? At least you went to school, you are exposed to different ideas, different careers. Maybe you grown your network, and maybe you can land a pretty good job. That's what I'm just trying to say, because I feel like the whole pathway of just going to the sports, hey, that's good, but it's very risky. I think we kind of mentioned you're trying to get to a certain spot, risky. You're
Mm.
I'm always saying in especially in the in sports and high physical activity, you're always one injury away from not even performing the same how you used to be. So to me, that going that route, like what you went, Toko. Let's just say you went to that route, and that Lafayette kid went that route. Everything felt as to plan. But to me, I always my process of thinking. Let's just say go do your best foot forward, and you need a luck to also not get injured, not a severe injury. But then at least you, like you mentioned, Toko, and like that Lafayette kid, you went to university, you got exposed to what education is like, because if everything doesn't work out, at least you can fall back. At least, oh, okay, at least I got this piece of paper that maybe it can take me somewhere. If everything else didn't go to plan, so I'm just like thinking that the, that when young
Mm.
kids make their decisions, just always think, always have multiple plans, goals, and what's gonna give you the most opportunity. But that's just me thinking out
Yeah,
loud with
not
their
100%.
pathways.
What was it like, Toko? Because obviously, I mean, your uncle said it's a waste of time. What was the what was
Your
the
uncle or our uncle? Which uncle is
our uncle or his uncle, whichever it is? Um, what was the reception from the family? Did you tell them you were going to do wrestling, right? Or you're like, you know what? I'm going to keep this undercover until, if it doesn't work out, at least no one knew about it. And then only let them know when I have a contract for wrestling. What was your strategy in
navigate?
response from the
Yeah.
family on your decision?
Uh, no, actually, I didn't tell anyone. Um, when because I was afraid as well. I didn't want to go into this and fail, and then everybody's gonna go, "Oh, see, we told you." But
Yeah.
I actually, you know, I, when that economy failed that time, um, I couldn't find a team, but I didn't let anybody know that I couldn't find a team to
Hmm.
get into. So when the wrestling came about, I went and did it and tried out and got in. And I made sure, I made it first before I could tell anyone. But I think it was 6 to 8 months in before, and then I debuted. Was when they found out. I can't remember how they found out. I think they others saw it on my one of my posts or something, and then but I do remember my parents saying, "Oh, maybe you should come back home and be a policeman or something."
What's
But
the
I did
feeling
say,
now?
yeah, to my
What's the
dad. I
feeling
said,
now from the family? Now that you've, like you said, 14 plus years, what's the thought of the family? Are they like, yeah, you shouldn't have done that anyway? Or they're like, hey,
"Oh, yeah, it's a running joke. Sometimes I'll bring it up, but I remember, the first couple of times I came back to New Zealand, and just my parents still couldn't get it, get around the thought of, their son's a wrestler because it's nothing,
Mm.
it's unheard of,
yeah,
not
because
a
they have
kid thing. How
nothing.
cool!
Yeah, they don't have anything
Unless
to
you, yeah,
compare it to, right? They're
Yeah.
like, what the
Not
heck is our
exposed.
son doing?
yeah,
Yeah.
Mm.
yeah. But throughout the years, when I started making some money, I'd ease the burden on the with the bills, and taking them on holidays, and sending them to other countries to visit other kids and other
Mm.
siblings. But sometimes, here and there, I would, you know, I would joke around and say to my dad, imagine if I had come back and be a policeman, you wouldn't be flying around and going visiting everybody. And he was
Mm,
just laughing.
Yeah.
yeah.
But
And
it
like,
was good because I did remember when I first told them, and they were like, "No, you should be a policeman or whatever." I said to them, "Give me 1 year, just give me 1 year." If, because when I was playing rugby, I wasn't making as much. Like we were talking about earlier, I had a contract, but I didn't have the voice to, ask them for what I was worth.
mm,
Mm.
And when I got into wrestling, I learned that,
Mm.
and I asked them, give me 1 year, and then I'll show you I'm worth it. It's worth it. And then I remember the first time I had one match, and I got paid more than I did in a month of playing rugby in Japan
Mm.
for one match. And I remember getting that, and then going home, and then just handing it over to my dad, and his face is like, "What is this?"
Mm.
did you rob a bank, son? What's going on here? I said be a policeman, not a criminal. No, and this is and to me, Toko, what I think this is what is exciting. This is what's really exciting about what you're doing with your story is not just that you've trailblazed a new path and you just didn't create a new path, but you're flourishing, you're very successful in this path. That's one thing, right? Because once somebody sees someone else do it, it's so much easier. The hard part of being the first person is you don't know who to say that's the right way or how to do it. So you've kind of trailblazed a new path, and you not only said it's possible, you said, dude, we can be successful at doing this. What's really exciting for me is for the next phase is training that next generation that comes, and not only to show them the path, make them successful, but once they make it, because to me, I see it in two stages. It's one thing to make it. The next stage is to capitalize or maximize the opportunity once you make it, right? And to have the right mentality. Okay, and we'll just use the Brian To'o example. Now you're the best wing in the NRL. Now you got to make sure everybody who's sitting at the negotiation table remembers that when you're sitting and negotiating the contract, don't be overly shy and say, "Oh, I hope they remember I'm the greatest." No, you remind them and you tell them I'm the greatest, and I want to see how great I am reflected in the contract, because that's the next phase, is to maximize that opportunity. And that's where I think you're going to be able to help a lot of that next group coming through,
Mm,
is say, hey, I can get you there, but I can do another thing too, and that is to maximize the opportunity when you make it. Um, that's what I'm really excited about, because that's that next generation, like we're talking about when we watched that video in the beginning. We're starting to see these Polynesians not just get to that level because they had their parents and grandparents get to that level. They're not just getting to the level, they are excelling and maximizing the opportunity. From your perspective, obviously, as a wrestler, what is it like to see, like Roman Reigns, the Usos, and then more of the wrestlers in Japan coming from your group? I think you've had a couple students of yours sign contracts to go to Japan. What is it like for you to start seeing, like, on the international stage, everybody recognizing that opportunity, and that's in the the profession that you chose? How does that make you feel, and how does that motivate you to continue to do what you're doing with the next generation?
I think it's probably long overdue
Mm,
because um, for years the islanders, the Samoans, the Tongans, the Fijians in wrestling were just seen as savages. All you have to do is just look strong, be savage, and that's your gimmick, right? And I'm really glad that the last 10, 15 years things have changed, especially because of The Rock. Being able to achieve all the things he's achieved, and create the pathway for guys like Roman Reigns, where it's not just the look. Now you're a different type of islander. You can talk and look different. You don't have to be barefoot. And
mm,
the last 14 years, myself and Tamatonga over in Japan, and then we had the Usos over in America, and Roman Reigns uh, really helped advance that how do you say, advance that aura, or the way people thought about Islanders, because we weren't doing what the King Hakus and the
mm,
Rikishis
yeah,
mm,
and the Superfly, those guys back then, they did great. They,
but
mm,
one
um,
dimensional.
they created the pathway for us, but at the same time, for a long time, we were stuck with that image
mm,
of how Islanders should be in the ring. But the last 10, 15 years, we've fought hard to be able to get everybody to see us as formidable challengers to, being at the top spot. The Rock was just different, and it was different in the sense where he comes as a half Islander, where he wasn't just seen as a savage Islander, because to me it was because he was half black, and he didn't have to be a savage. But these days, being in the limelight or having that top spot is finally on the grasp of any Islander because of what came before us, and I'm really happy about that, because seeing that, even though I've been in the business for a while now, it gives me motivation to keep going, because it is tough when you try and make it to the top, but they don't see you as champion material because you're a savage. So
mm,
those guys over there doing what they're doing is just uh, leaps forward for us Islanders, and I'm starting to see a lot of Island boys come to training, come to try out the wrestling, and just go back 5, 6 years, none. I have no Islanders training with me, because they don't see, they didn't see that. The exception was The Rock
Mhm.
Mm.
because he could talk, he could do a lot of things. But now, of
Do
being
we
at the
lose?
top
Oh,
for
there
a
we
long time,
go. Mm.
and then having the Usos there, and now the Tongan boys, the Tama and Tangaloa join in.
Mm.
It's just going to make things even bigger for us, even better for us. And that just translates as like any other football and rugby,
It's exciting.
with our people, the more they see us, the more they see their own faces or their own type of people on TV, the more they can dream and believe that they can make it there too.
Mm. Mm.
Have any? I was going to mention something. I want to get your thoughts on this. We're pretty excited to hear that Tamatonga and the Tangaloa signings to WWE. It would be a dream come true to see a rivalry between Tamatonga, Tangaloa, and Roman Reigns and the Usos, right? And basically relive like a storyline of two empires challenging each other. I don't know, man. That would be pretty exciting, and I think um, people would love that. What are your thoughts of that possibility, and what kind of opportunities that could come
That would
out of that?
create. Mm.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that signing from WWE for those guys?
It's WWE and our business is entertainment, so it's like any other series. There's gonna be storylines, there's gonna
Mhm.
be rivalries, and if those rivalries get old, they're gonna create some new ones. And evolutionary wise, you stay together, and then when people get a little tired of you, they're gonna figure out ways of making it more exciting. So I do expect that to happen, and of course, you know who I'm gonna be cheering for,
Mm.
and but it's all fun and all entertainment. So it's all
Mm.
fun and games. I do worry a little bit because with our past, especially in New Zealand, in America as well, the Tongans versus Samoans have ended up as a deadly rivalry in the past, and I hope it doesn't get to that point. But if people understand it's just entertainment, then I think it'll be a big thing.
Yeah,
Mm.
I have hope that everybody has. We have the Matematonga play against Toa
Tosa.
Samoa and stuff, and it's everybody understands, and hopefully that would be, and hopefully everybody sees it as not necessarily as a competition, but the
Yeah.
highlighting of our cultures. That's the big picture view, right? The fact that our cultures will be on mainstream across the world, in Japan, in the US, in Australia, in New Zealand. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I was gonna say I hope something like that happens, and if like what Toko says, if it will be telling. I know there was a little bit here and there, but if it becomes deadly, that means as a people we don't know who we are. Then that we're kind of,
mhm.
because we that means this whole stuff of saying we were one people is not really a thing. But we at the same time we can have a little fun and little challenge here and there, because to me, and that's kind of the whole thing of why we're kind of discussing history with this whole thing, is to say we're pretty much one people. It was just all under one empire. And because if we don't do that, and then let's just say we can't have fun games, we can never really be strong as a Polynesian people, kind of
Yeah,
thing. So yeah, I hope to me that Du and I were talking about that, dude. That would be an awesome thing. They can have that little
storyline.
rivalry. Yeah, like when they get tired of what it is with the whole bloodline, then they find out that Tonga was its own kind of thing and became like a own separate, and then it becomes a whole thing. Because you could, and
Yeah,
that not only that, like what you mentioned, Toko, that will probably create an opportunity for whoever the Tongans, and maybe it wouldn't be just Tangaloa and Tamatonga. They'll probably will give another olive branch to another up and coming Tongans or some Tongans somewhere else,
Mm.
and
it's
it will
more
bring that group,
opportunity.
and
Yeah,
then it will give them the platform, because all they want is opportunity, right? A chance to kind of let's see if they can talk. Can they carry themselves in a different way? And
Yes.
then, like, who never knows, that's gonna sprung up a whole new generation of other Tongan wrestlers that are gonna come. But yeah, to me, I hopefully it won't, trickle out. People can understand. If it comes become more than that, that means we're always gonna have bad apples. We're gonna always have some crazy Tongans. Someone's do stupid things. We can't control them. But in a whole, hopefully we've kind of gotten better since that time. But yeah, that's what Tu and I were thinking, because the opportunity would be huge
Huge
if that
for
was
both
in
our
the
people.
working.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And here, I guess we're kind of coming up here to the tail end, Toko, but I would like to help people understand. So now we've covered your story. You've taken a very rare path. It's been successful for you. You're now developing that path for the next generation. What else are you working on? I've seen a lot
Mm,
of your posts. You're always active on social media. I know you have your gym.
Kava
Talk
bar.
about your Kava bar. Just kind of talk about, hey, it seems to me that your experience has really expanded your mind to say, dude, there's opportunity everywhere. We just got to know how to leverage the resources and the capacity we have now. Just talk about the different um like engagements you have and what your vision is for each one, whether it's the gym, whether it's the Fale Kava, whether it's the Kava bar, and just kind of help people understand that, what you're doing is leveraging your opportunities now and creating new opportunities based off of what you've developed so far. Does that make sense? Just kind of broad,
Yeah.
give everybody a good idea on what you're involved in now and what's the vision behind it.
Right now, I'm spending more time here in New Zealand and traveling to Australia as well. Trying to do shows, promoting wrestling shows, and running trainings here in my gym in Auckland, and recruiting, just trying to find good talent. Once I find them, then I train them and then send them overseas to Japan or America or England and Mexico. That's one thing I'm doing. I've been doing that for the last 7 years. Recently, since 2020, I've really gotten into heavily into social media. I started off thinking or challenging my students about. I remember I was watching Gary V, a very, very
Hmm.
big influencer, and he suggested to that people should sign up to TikTok because it's the next big thing. And at that time, everybody was saying it's only kids, it's for dancing and all that.
Making fun of
But
TikTok and
I
people
like,
that were on it.
yeah, it was made fun of. Only idiots will go in there because it's a kids app. But I like Gary Vee, and I liked a lot of the things he teaches. So I got the TikTok, and I challenged my students. This is a new platform. I challenge all of you guys to see, because part of our business is self promotion, because nobody's going to book
Branding.
you if they don't know who you
Yep.
are. So I challenged a lot of my students. I said, let's all sign up to this new thing called TikTok, and then
mm,
we see who gets the most followers in a certain couple of a couple of months. And most of these guys fell off, but I just kept going, and then ended up mounting a massive following on TikTok, and that translated to the Facebook and Instagram. But it's very important, and this I'm so happy to see you guys going with your podcast, and just keep going. That's why I see you guys do it, because this is very important, especially in business. Because if you amount a massive following, whatever uh, product you would have in the future, or whatever anything you want to promote, you'll have a pre-existing customers right there. So it's very important. Social media is the future, and it's going to be very hard if you try and advertise without social media.
Mm.
Um,
mm,
so I try and keep up. It doesn't matter what it is. I try and put out some content whenever, and I see you guys are doing the same thing. You're trying to stay active, which is really good, because a lot of people start and then they just give up easily because they think nobody's watching. But that's not the case. Gary Vee said he would he wouldn't care if people watched him. If only one person watched him, he said he'll still give it 100% because that's one extra person that'll follow him.
Hmm.
So social media, I don't like to sit still. If I have nothing to do today, I'll make sure I'll come up with some sort of eating video or comedy or
Mm.
motivational, just so I can stay active and people can still see me. So that's the second thing I'm working on. And the third thing is the cover. I've recently opened up the cover bar, and it's funny because I went to Maui, and for a whole 2 weeks I was there. I was out drinking, drinking at the clubs, and my nephew Lobua would just every day bug me. Let's go to the cover bar. Let's go to the cover bar. And I didn't want to go because I thought, oh, I'm not going to get a buzz. I'm not going to
Mm.
feel good. It's going to be boring. It's going to be everybody just sitting around talking. And it was the last night of my trip to Maui. I finally asked them, oh, if you want to go to the cover bar, come hang out. And when we went there, I had my beer and I sat outside the shop because you can't take drinks in there. So I sat outside the shop and had my beer. And the guys were drinking kava just by the door. And when I finished my beer, I thought, oh, okay, you know what? I'll try it.
Might as
So
well.
I said, go to the bar because there's a drink, a kava cocktail. And that was foreign to me because all I knew was, of course, the normal kava. So I went up and ordered one, came, sat down, and I had a sip. And that's the sip that changed my life because I was, and I do admit, I was an alcoholic because I would never go more than an hour without thinking about my next drink. But ever since then, my life has changed. I hardly touch the alcohol because Kava did that. Once I understood that the effect really helped my body relax, I tell everyone it's a liquid massage because once you
Yeah.
take it, your muscles relax and you just want to lay down and have a good sleep. And my sleep, I'll close my eyes and open my eyes the next day.
Mm.
No dreams, and that's the best feeling
Mm.
for me because usually when I go to sleep, my mind keeps going, and when I wake up in the morning, I feel tired because my mind's still running 100
Mm.
miles an hour. But the cover has changed my life, and that's what I'm into at the moment, and I'm trying to. I do understand the traditional side of things. I still want to keep it that way, but at the same time, a lot of our young people and our new generation don't understand that, and they won't make the effort to go and experience the cover ceremony or the cover
Mm.
kalapus. But just another way I thought would help get some of these kids off alcohol because it has changed my life. And drinking was I thought for the longest time alcohol was going to be the killer of me. I thought I was going to die in my 40s because all of the alcohol I have been abusing for the last 20, 30 years.
Mm.
But the cover, this product is amazing. And
Mm.
when people come to buy it, I try and tell them my story. This will help you. And I find a lot of the young guys, a lot of kids, the younger generation are coming on Fridays and Saturdays. They'd rather come and get the cover instead of drinking, going buying
Mm.
boxes of beer and stuff, which is great.
Mm.
I have my fighters who train here every day, and they love it because after an intense sparring session,
Relax their
it's
bodies.
perfect.
Yeah.
It helps their muscles relax, and they don't have to spend hundreds of dollars going to massages and all that.
Yeah.
And that's where I am right now.
No, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Masi, any last question? I think if you want to have a last question, I'll ask a last question, and then I know Toko said he had some other commitments.
Yes. I guess last question. Toko, it's funny, like people like who are in professional and that actually, I think Mayweather is. There's only a few athletes I know that don't touch alcohol. Mayweather, Money Mayweather, he's another one that he doesn't touch alcohol. He does other ways to kind of recover and socialize. He said he will always buy alcohol for his friends and stuff, but he said he wouldn't touch because he knows that in order to, because he knows his body and what he does, in order to optimize his performance, he said, I just don't touch alcohol. I think Trump is the same way too. He's had
Yeah,
some experience.
Uncle Donald
Uncle
doesn't do
Donald,
it.
he's still sharp. He is 70, what, 8 or something right now. He's still sharp in the mind, battling all the politics that's over there. He's another one that doesn't touch alcohol. So my question was going to be, what is the major difference when you say you've gotten away from alcohol and going to cover, other than just like, have you noticed that mentally, like I think you mentioned that Kava helps you actually sleep better. That's a big proponent to actually be
Living
more
longer.
productive, living longer, be more productive. What's some other ways that you've noticed that just withdrawing or having limited alcohol and just doing the whole kava with your, trying to accomplish your goals that you have left here on this earth. So yeah, what's some other things that you've noticed?
And I really do wish I wish I had found the cover when I was in my 20s, because I would have saved a lot of money, and
That's
it
the
would have
first thing
been
that
good
came
for
to
me
my mind.
health.
Alcohol is not cheap.
Yeah.
It's not cheap. Yeah.
And of course, why do we do alcohol? Of course, it's either peer pressure or socializing. You can't socializing and have fun, but after tasting and getting understanding the buzz you get from cover, it's not a what do you call it? I'd say it's similar to alcohol, but it's more of a chill buzz because it just makes you relax and want to smile and talk to people.
Yeah,
Mm,
Whereas
a sense of
alcohol
well-being.
yes, and it feels healthy.
Hmm.
It feels
Yeah,
healthy. And years ago, I would have been a lot healthier than I am today. But the big
mm,
difference is the health side of things.
mm. Awesome.
awesome. Yeah, and just to kind of follow up on that, man, in the States right now, Toko, Kava is exploding. It is the youth here. It is they just had
Mm,
what they call the Kava Lake City. It's like a convention, and they invited all these different kalapus from throughout the U.S. They all met in Salt Lake in like a major like hotel, and I've
mm,
seen some of the videos. It's just full of different kalapus. It's exploding here, and it's the youth, and it's not just
yeah.
with the young men, with the young women as well. And if that prevents them from going hanging out with gangs and alcohol and getting involved in crime,
Yes,
good for them. My
yes.
my last question, Toko, is what what advice would you give someone who is looking to get involved in wrestling, regardless of what age they are? And you would say, I noticed you mentioned, hey, start social media, right? Like that's a big one. I don't care how old you are. If you want to get into wrestling, that seems to be a skill that's necessary for wrestling. What else besides the training? Is there any other advice that you would say, hey, top three things or top five? Let's go top five because we already mentioned social media and a couple other things. But what are the top five things you would say you want to pursue a path in, and we'll call it entertainment, right? Because that's what wrestling is. It's an entertainment
Yes.
industry. What would you recommend and say to someone, say, hey, these are the top five things you need to do if you're serious about making a career out of wrestling?
My first advice would find out how many schools or
Mm,
are there any schools nearby, and figure out which one is the best one. Then you go there and figure
And
out if
just to be
that's the
clear,
right one.
Toko, when you say school, not a high school or anything, you're talking about like a dojo, a gym, right?
A wrestling school. Wrestling
Okay.
school. Yes. So
Sorry, I
find
just
out if
wanted
there's
to
any
clarify.
if there was any wrestling schools in your area. Uh, Second, find out if it's the best school. Find the best school, because There's no use going to a school where they don't know how to teach you how to get there. So figure out which one. For example, one of the New Zealand boys I've helped in the past wanted to become a wrestler, and he thought the schools in New Zealand back then weren't up to par. So he straight after high school flew to England, and that's where he learned how to wrestle, and that's where I found him and took him to Japan. Now he's massive in America. But that's the thing, you got to find out the best school, and it's not just wrestling. Whatever sport or job you want to go after or career, you got to figure out who's going to teach you the best and the
Invest
fastest
in
way to
you.
get there.
Yeah.
Yes, go find it, go there and listen. You might have heard of Samoa Joe. He's one of the big names in wrestling. And I asked him one time when I met him, I asked him for some advice, and he gave me one of the best ones. He said, "Shut your mouth and open your ears. That's all you need to know." So if you find these schools, go there with an open mind, but just shut your mouth and listen to all the advice you're given.
That's a good one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, with that being said, Toko, appreciate it very much. I
Yep.
appreciate your time. We're grateful. We know you have a lot of commitments and a lot of responsibility, so we do appreciate the time that you have. We're very excited for you. Give you the last word on any direction on where people can follow you, or just any way you want to close out the show. Go ahead and close it out, and then we'll call it a day.
You can find me on Toks Fale on all my social medias, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, X, and yeah, if you want to get some Kava, hit me up on any of those platforms, and we'll hook you up. But one thing I want to leave you guys with is, if there's something you want to do, if there's something you want to go after, first you must believe it, and if you believe it, then you're halfway there.
100%. 90%
Amen to
of
that.
winning is showing up. If you don't show up, 100% failure rate. So I'm definitely a big believer in that. So with that being said, thank you, everyone. And as always, ask the hard questions and stay curious. Peace.
Yes, sir. Peace.
Malo.